There it is. The Griswold family Christmas tree.
Ah, the Griswold family Christmas tree. Hey, it's Christmas time, and welcome to this episode of the Keep Growing podcast. I'm John Morgan, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about Christmas trees. So here at Bob's, every year we offer a selection of Christmas trees, and there's a little bit less of a selection this year, and I'm going to get to that a little bit later in the podcast. But over the years, there's been quite a few myths and ideas to help preserve your cut Christmas tree and help it last a long time. Really, caring for it is pretty simple, and I'm going to give you a few tips to help you not only care for your tree, but also pick out the right tree for you. So first things first, you want to choose the location for your Christmas tree. When it comes to choosing a location for your Christmas tree, of course, you want to put it in an area where it's going to be featured prominently in your house. You know, most people traditionally put it in your living room, in front of a window, so people can enjoy it from the outside too. One thing that I would recommend is keeping an eye on where your heating vents are in your house. Exposing your Christmas tree to a direct draft, that's going to help dry it out quicker and lead to needle loss. So that's one thing that I would shy away from. Other than that, the main thing that you need is a tape measure. You want to know how tall your ceiling is, and then of course subtract the height for the stand, and then also your star or angel on top. And you also want to measure the width of the area. That's going to be important so you know what size diameter tree to get. Because you don't want to get to the Christmas tree lot and be like, it looks like it'll fit. And that kind of brings me to the next thing. Whenever you head out to the lot, take your tape measure with you. And, another key point, make sure you measure your stand so that way you know the trunk will fit into the stand. Okay, so now we get to the Christmas tree lot, and there are around 35 species of trees in the US to choose from. So I'm going to kind of break it down into the three main groups of trees, and really it's kind of two main groups, and then there's one that's kind of an outlier, I guess. But first, let's go with firs. See what I did there? But firs, they have short needles, and the needles tend to be pretty long-lived. So the needles will stick around for quite a while on the tree before they start to fall off. But there's a few different types of firs. Probably the most popular in our area is the Fraser fir. And they're really fragrant, so that makes them a great choice because they kind of come with that great pine smell included. They also have bicolor needles. So they're green on top, and then on the underside of the needle, it's kind of a silver, which is really nice for giving you that sort of snowy, frosty Christmas look. Another fir type is the Douglas fir. And Douglas firs, they have a really dark green, and they kind of have a bluish tinge to the needles. Their needles tend to be a little bit darker green than the Fraser fir. And then if you live over in the Pacific Northwest, there is the Noble fir. And they're kind of specific to the western US. They're a little bit different in that they have soft, longer needles. But they're another in the fir family. Okay, then we get into the pines. And your pines, they have longer needles. And they're also known for having pretty good needle retention. Probably the most popular in the eastern side of the US is, of course, the eastern white pine. And they have a lighter green needle to them. It's kind of a yellow-green color, but they also have that really rich pine smell. And then if you want to go with a darker needle color, there's the Scotch pine. And their needles are also really long and soft. I mean, a Scotch pine, you can almost go up and hug it. It's so soft. So it might make a great choice, if you have small kids that want to be kind of touching the needles. In the southern U.S., the popular choice down there is the Virginia pine. And it has really bright green needles. They're also able to withstand a little bit warmer temperatures. So if you get down into the Florida area, where you've got Christmas and it's like 80 degrees outside, the Virginia pine is able to withstand those warmer temperatures and still maintain its good looks. So finally, there is the eastern red cedar. And this is kind of the outlier because it's a cedar. But it has that pungent cedar smell. And it also has a very distinctive look. So if you want something really different, you can go with an eastern red cedar. Okay, so as I mentioned before, once you pick out the tree you want, it is important to measure it. So you don't want to end up with a Clark Griswold situation.
It's not big, it's just full.
Dad, that thing wouldn't fit in our yard.
Not going in our yard, Russ. It's going in our living room.
Yeah. You want to measure the height, the diameter, and then again the trunk diameter to make sure it's going to fit in the stand. And most tree lots, what they'll do is they'll run the tree through a device that wraps it in netting. And that makes it easier to transport it. So once you get it home, before you cut that netting off, you want to cut off the bottom 1 to 2 inches of the trunk. And the reason why is because, these trees, if you're buying it from a lot of cut trees, they might have been cut a few weeks prior. It's had time for the sap at the base of the trunk where the cut is, it's had time for that sap to dry out, and it kind of forms a plug, which in the case of transporting and displaying the trees for sale, that's a great thing because it locks in moisture and it kind of helps the trees stay fresh. But once you get it home and you want to get it into the base and get it watered, that sap plug is going to prevent water from going up the trunk. So you want to cut off the bottom 1 to 2 inches of trunk and immediately get it in the stand and then get water in it. Over the first few days, you're going to have to water it pretty much every day because it's going to need a little bit of time to rehydrate itself. And this is where you kind of get into that cut Christmas tree mythology. For years, people have said, add this to the water, add that to the water. I've heard everything from adding sugar to the water, to Sprite, to even adding, when it came out on the market, adding Viagra. Santa's little helper. It would help, I guess. Oh my. I'm not even going to say that. Yeah, I will. Some people thought it would help keep the tree erect. But yeah, all of those have been proven to be pretty much worthless. When it comes to keeping the needles on the tree, the best thing that's going to help is just plain water. And some of those have been tested and actually show that it causes needles to drop off earlier. But yeah, just plain water is going to do the best. That gets us to Christmas and to the point of decorating the tree, which is, that's kind of up to you. That's out of my realm. So, skip ahead to after Christmas, or a lot of people like to leave their tree up until after New Year's. My wife, I think she would go all the way to spring if she could, because she absolutely loves Christmas. But after Christmas, there's a few different options for disposing of your Christmas tree. After Christmas, you want to dispose of your tree in an ecologically friendly way. And there's a few different ways you can do that. You just don't want to be chucking it out at the curb for the trash pickup. The first option is to recycle it into mulch. Like with the leaves in the previous episode, there are towns that will grind up your tree and turn it into mulch for you. and then give you back an allotment of that mulch in the springtime. Another option is to use it around your house. So if you have bird feeders in your backyard, a great idea is to leave it out in your backyard as a place for birds to find refuge during the winter. Once the needles fall off, it gives them great little areas to perch as they're doing their little bird things around the bird feeder. And then once you kind of get into the summertime, if you have a fire pit, you've instantly got kindling and some firewood for your fire pit. Also, if you have raised beds, you can cut up the tree into smaller pieces and bury it down in the bottom of your beds. And over time, it'll break down and add those nutrients back into your raised beds. And I could get into the whole hugelkultur thing. I'll add a link in the show notes to hugelkultur. Yeah, it's a mouthful, but it's a thing. And it's using wood and basically cut trees as kind of a starter for your garden beds. Yeah, check that out in the show notes. So when it comes to disposing of your trees, there's a lot of ways to do it ecologically. And I was on Facebook earlier in the week, and somebody had shared an article about Christmas cacti and why they're a better choice than Christmas trees. I like Christmas cactuses. I've got a couple in my office. But one of the points that they were trying to make in that blog post was that Christmas trees are bad for the environment. And I don't really want to nitpick them too much, but I don't know if they just poorly researched it or what, but one of their claims was that it leads to deforestation, which most Christmas tree farms, it's not like they're going out and clear-cutting forests to create a Christmas tree farm. In fact, the number of tree farms has dropped over the years. Also, it's one of the least intensively managed types of agriculture. So Christmas tree farmers, they're really not going out there and spraying tons of pesticides and fertilizers. So you don't have a lot of the runoff that you have with other types of huge commercial agriculture operations. And also there's the crop turnaround time. It's about 8 years for the average Christmas tree crop. And during that time, you've got this huge field of trees that's acting as a carbon sink. So, if anything, Christmas tree farms are really an ecological choice. I think the only issue that you run into is when it comes to disposing of the trees. And I just gave you some really great options. But as I mentioned, there are fewer Christmas tree farms than there were a few years ago. And this year, and over the last few years, there's actually been a little bit of a Christmas tree shortage. And there's a few different reasons for that. The primary reason is because of the recession that we had about 10 years ago. So as I said, the turnaround time on a Christmas tree crop is about 8 years. So if you jump in a time machine and go back a decade ago, folks were opting to buy artificial Christmas trees because they were saying money's kind of tight right now. So as a result, Christmas tree farms had an overabundance of trees. In a reaction to that, they planted less trees. So you have fewer trees being planted in the early 2010s. And then also during that time, in the Midwest, you had some really bad droughts. And that led to some crop losses in Christmas tree farms. So combining those two things together, and remember, a crop time of 8 years, we're catching up to that point where it's caught up to us. And then also you add in the uptick in the economy right now. So more people are going, hey, you know what? I've got this artificial tree, but I really miss having a live tree, and I can afford it now. So we've kind of swung back in the opposite direction to where we have Christmas tree shortages. And to me, it kind of highlights something with our own industry, and that's that we kind of steer like a battleship. By the time we spot a trend, our reaction time is just so slow because, we're dealing with plant growth cycles. and we can't turn on a dime like some industries can. So yeah, I'm starting to ramble on here about Christmas trees. And I'm skipping over the whole second thing that I wanted to talk about. And that is, if you don't want to go the cut tree route, but you still want to have a live Christmas tree, you can go with a ball and burlap tree or a container tree. So with these, you really need to prepare in advance. I'm talking like late fall sort of prepare. So like right now, while the ground is still thawed out, go dig a hole. Like right now, drop everything, go dig the hole in your yard where you're going to plant it. Because, January, February rolls around, the ground, depending on where you live, might be frozen solid. So you want to dig the hole ahead of time, and you want to dig it to be about 2 times the size of the root ball. So you're probably saying, okay, 2 times the size of the root ball. How do I know how big the root ball is going to be when it's something that I'm going to be purchasing in the future? Alright, so a good guess for that is somewhere in the 12 to 18 inch range in diameter. So that's for the root ball. So I would go, on average, I would say around a 3-foot diameter hole would be sufficient. I would go at least 1.5 feet deep. And that'll be safe. You can always backfill the hole a little bit if you need to. And what you want to do after you dig that hole is fill it up with mulch, because that's going to be easy to dig out later. Then cover it with a tarp. You don't want it to fill up with water and then freeze. That would be a bad thing. So, we've prepared the hole. Once you go and pick out your tree, and usually with a ball and burlap tree, you're not going to be getting a 6 or 8 foot tall tree, because the root ball size would be massive with that, and it would simply be too heavy to carry. You're going to be talking more in the 3 to 4 foot range for the tree. But you do want to make sure that you can get one that you can handle, or you and a buddy can handle. So once you buy your tree and bring it home, you don't want to take it right inside the house. You want to kind of acclimate it to the temperatures inside, because, we're already getting into colder temperatures outside. And it going from 40 degrees to 70 degrees, that's going to make the tree go, whoa, what's going on here? Also, you don't want to keep it inside for too long. So a cut tree, you can get by with Thanksgiving to New Year's. With a ball and burlap tree, I would go 10 to 12 days max on bringing it inside. Much beyond that, you're going to start harming the tree. And remember, it is something that you want to plant. Planning on that 10 to 12 day window, and you can kind of adjust that around Christmas. About a week beforehand is when you want to purchase the tree and start acclimating it. So to do that, put it in a garage or a shed where it's, not quite the temperature of inside the house, but yet it's protected from really cold temperatures. And during that time, you want to keep the root ball moist, but you don't want to have it soaking in water. So it's kind of the opposite of a cut tree where you've literally got it in a pot of water. With a ball and burlap tree, you want to keep that root ball moist. You're basically treating it like a big potted plant, because really that's what it is. So the easiest way to water it is to put ice cubes on top of the root ball, and then let them melt and kind of drain down into it to water it. And the other thing that's going to do is it's going to help keep the roots moist, but it's also going to help keep them cool. And that's going to kind of play a trick on the tree. It's going to go, oh, my roots are cold. I'm still outside and it's wintertime. This is nice. Okay, so after a week of acclimation, then you can bring it inside and, decorate it just like a normal tree. A great thing to put them in to display them, and it kind of goes with the kind of farmhouse look, is a galvanized tub. That makes a great display option. And also, whenever you put that ice on top to water it, it'll catch any runoff. After Christmas, you kind of want to do the acclimation process in reverse. So you want to take it back out to the garage or a shed. And then here's the important thing. Wait until kind of a mild day. Until you have a day that's like in the 40s and it's kind of sunny. That's really the best time to go out and plant it. So when it comes to planting it, once you get it in the hole and you kind of figure out if you need to backfill or not, you want to remove the burlap, of course, from it. Sometimes the burlap is like wire wrap, so you might need some wire cutters to do that with. But you want to remove the burlap, kind of loosen up the roots a little bit, and then start backfilling it with soil and tamp it in. The next thing is to put a really heavy layer of mulch around it to help protect it. And once you get it through that first winter, there's really not a lot of care that needs to go into it. With it being wintertime, once you plant it and water it initially on that kind of warm day, you might want to check on it and water it occasionally, but really you want to avoid overwatering it in the wintertime because then you're going to lead to freezing and ice issues. So that's really all there is to it when it comes to planting a ball and burlapped or container tree, and really all that you need to help it keep growing. And well, before I leave you, I've got this week's gardening wisdom. And of course, it being Christmas, we need some Christmas wisdom. And this week's quote comes from the author Roy L. Smith. And he said, "He who has not Christmas in his heart will never find it under a tree." To learn more about the Keep Growing podcast, you can head on over to bobsmarket.com/keepgrowing for show notes and links to other nifty stuff. And if you have questions, comments, or smart remarks, you can email me at keepgrowing@bobsmarket.com. Or if you have a question that you would like to have featured in an episode, you can head over to anchor.fm/keepgrowing and leave a voice message there for me. And as I said, it might just make it into an episode. And of course, you can find us on social media at Bob's Market. And the music in this week's episode is by Silent Partner. Copyright 2019, Bob's Market and Greenhouses, Incorporated.
Where do you think? Nobody's leaving. Nobody's walking out on this fun, old-fashioned family Christmas. No, we're all in this together.